Welcome everyone to this episode of Build Beyond the Digital Payments Agenda. I am Zach Levine, VP and Head of Revenue for North America here at Checkout.com. And firstly, a bit of background around what we're doing here today in this webinar series. This is, I think, the third or fourth of these installments that we've done. The goal is to bring together a targeted group of senior product, e-commerce, and payment leaders from forward-thinking businesses at the cutting edge of the payments industry to discuss various topics within payments. So it's a chance for you all to hear experts talk about their learnings and experiences, how they're building beyond just the needs of today and for the future. And this session in particular, as we start the year in 2023, is a little bit of a look back at 2022 and also a look beyond at the next year ahead in 2024 as well. 2022 was a big year, a new period of economic uncertainty that has created challenges for businesses across all sectors. For payments in particular, it's actually quite a counterintuitive implication. Optimization becomes more important. Payments and money movement, the lifeblood of a business, becomes even more critical. So today we're going to spend a lot of time talking about how payments can be a catalyst for operational efficiency, but also a revenue driver for businesses like GE Healthcare and Sony PlayStation to thrive in 2023, 2024, and beyond. And with that, I'd like to introduce our two panelists, Cheeson Tan from Sony PlayStation and Kelsey Dowling from GE Healthcare. Cheeson, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, say a few words about your background, and then we'll flip it over to Kelsey.
Thanks, Zach, and thanks for having me on this. Hi everyone, I'm Cheeson. I'm a payment strategist at Sony PlayStation. So I primarily look after new business opportunities within the payment space, whether that be a new APM, a new payment provider. I undertake a lot of payment optimization initiatives, and as well as working on the digital content side, I also lead the payments experience for our relatively recent foray into our hardware, selling hardware online.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cheeson. And Kelsey.
Yes, hey everyone. Thanks for having me, Zach, and the Checkout team. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Kelsey Dowling, based in the UK, and I'm the technical product manager for payment solutions at GE Healthcare. I've been at the business around 7 years now and kind of solely focused on the payment space, I'd say, for the last kind of 4 years. And my team essentially is responsible for making sure we have the automated payment options available that our customers need in all of our markets where we have presence. GE Healthcare is obviously a very large global brand, so that means trying to support payments for potentially over 130 countries. So no small feat by any means, but I'm helping the team internally on digitizing and offering those payment methods customers want in the moments they need them.
Great. Thank you, Kelsey. And thank you guys both for participating in this session, being good partners in general, and for sharing all the insights that you're going to share in the next 45 minutes together. So with that, two quick housekeeping items. The first is that we do have 45 minutes together. This session will last 50 minutes. The second is we're going to make this a lot more interactive than a traditional webinar. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We'll be answering questions throughout that you have. In general, we like to do these as more of a, I was describing it just earlier as more of three friends sitting around the table having a chat, less so of an interview. So the more that you want to join us in that chat, take a seat down at the virtual table and engage, we invite you to do so, and welcome as many questions as you have. So to kick off, I would love to hear a little bit about Cheeson and Kelsey, your individual journeys to Sony PlayStation and GE Healthcare respectively. Would love to just hear how, starting with you, Cheeson, how did you find yourself working in a payments function for Sony PlayStation? How'd you end up here?
Yeah, sure. It's been a wild ride. So I've been in payments for well over a decade now, just like everyone else. As a little kid, I aspired to be that payments professional, mesmerized by that zip-zap card machine you saw back in the day. No, actually, in reality, like most people, I just fell into it and loved it. So I actually have a legal background and was sent on secondment from the law firm I was working at the time to work on the divestment of WorldPay from the Royal Bank of Scotland. So one of the first forays of fintech back when PSD1 was just about out. Then moved to WorldPay, changed career completely into the account management sales functions, and then flip-flopped my way through various PSPs and merchants until I found myself here, actually landing the role at PlayStation from a personal referral from an ex-WorldPay colleague, as I was taking a career break in Canada. So now I'm coming up to about 4 years at PlayStation. Originally started with maternity cover for someone at PlayStation and has just clung on since then.
What would you say are some of the biggest differences between working for a provider and working for a merchant? Similar content, but very different roles.
Yeah, I would say I guess because I was working more on the sales side within PSPs or the account management side, you focus on the things you have to sell primarily, and those kind of products that you are selling. Whereas on the merchant side, you do have a more holistic view of what's going on. So you have more interaction with the end user. You're thinking about the entire funnel rather than just maybe a small portion of it. And you just have, from the merchant side of things, just have a more detailed view of the whole payments ecosystem.
Cool. Kelsey, how about you? How did you end up in a payments function at GE Healthcare?
Yeah, similar to Chisun, it kind of happened accidentally, right? And then I found that it was obviously a really rewarding area, and like getting to understand kind of what happens in your day to day, right? When you're running your card in a shop, right? And you kind of find out all the background of what's happening with that transaction always kind of fascinated me, and kind of piecing the puzzle together. So I joined GE Healthcare kind of right out of university, joined a graduate program that they had there, kind of building new leaders essentially in the company in different spaces. Fell in love with specifically the product management side. So that program was kind of rotational. You try out different roles in the business, and very quickly enjoyed kind of the customer facing product management roles. So I joined what we call our customer digital experience team. So my team is kind of the team responsible for everything customer facing digitally. So gehealthcare.com and all the properties around that and how we sell online. And yeah, I was product manager for an application that was kind of US specific at the time, where customers could kind of track their orders and invoices online. And really, it was kind of a functional partner came and said, we'd love to add payment options to this portal, right, and allow customers to log in and make invoice payments there. And so that was kind of my foray into figuring out how are we going to do that, who are we going to partner with, right? What are the PSPs out there that are going to be a good fit for us? And really, we started from there, and it was as kind of integrating a payment option into that product. And as I started to dig into how we were handling things on the healthcare side, I realized there was no central team kind of doing this and managing this overall, right? There was really a big gap in terms of standardizing, having a payment expert team in the business, and kind of it took off from there really. And then that became a full-time role, right? And we quickly realized, we have multiple teams doing multiple integrations. There's no kind of central plan here. Like we need to be really thoughtful about this and kind of put some thought leadership around how we do it. So yeah, that kind of became how my team came about, and now we're a horizontal function trying to support all the global regions with payment. So yeah, like Chisun, it's been a ride.
And you've both been in these roles for a number of years. So I'm curious, looking back the last few years, how you've seen the role and perceptions of payments change within the business. Maybe Kelsey, you can start, and then Chisun.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely evolved, I would say, and it's definitely been a positive shift and uptake in interest. We have a lot of different customer-facing channels and applications throughout the business, and I'd say a few years ago it wasn't something kind of regularly discussed. Our e-commerce experiences kind of revolved a lot around offline payment methods, kind of invoicing customers for products and services, and really worrying about the payment later. We were very, I would say, kind of sales heavy focused, like how do we sell? And there was less focus internally on, how are we going to then collect all of that cash and kind of operationalize and standardize the process of collection. I'd say with, the changing landscape definitely kind of accelerated with the pandemic and kind of renewed business focus on scaling and growing e-commerce. Payments been a hot topic, and it's definitely one that's always at the table now. That's obviously increased kind of visibility and demand and opportunities for my team, but it certainly hasn't come without its challenges either. It has meant, rather than us kind of going around marketing what we can do and trying to convince kind of region and business leaders to try these things in their regions, often now they're coming to us, right, with their payment challenges and asking for kind of help and advice. So, they're saying things like, we've seen competitors using X, right? How can we do that? Do you guys have a solution that's going to work there? So it's definitely been kind of our team's responsibility to try and get ahead of those trends and changes in the payment space, and have solutions that are kind of readily available that they can leverage. So, that's why kind of partnerships and strategic relationships with good PSPs is very important, so that we can kind of meet those needs for the business. So definitely increased visibility and demand, and now is very, very kind of important area to cover off as we kind of evolve our strategy for growth.
Yeah. In a similar vein to Kelsey, yeah, we were kind of riding the COVID wave at the beginning of last year compared to this year, where we do feel the pressure. We are tasked with saving costs, generating more revenue. But one of the beauties of being in the payments team is that we have a long list of initiatives. It sometimes feels like a never-ending list of initiatives, which can be a good or a bad thing, but I definitely see it as a good thing. A big shift I kind of saw in the last little while is really regulation. I feel like a lot of the time I'm reacting to new regulation out there, which didn't really see a few years ago, even though obviously PSD was this large looming thing, but it was only one huge piece of regulation. But now there's regulation from loads of different countries, loads of different payment methods. So trying to react to a lot of that thing, I think a lot of those changes makes for a complicated life.
Jason, are you seeing any sort of proactive excitement from other parts of the business around payments, or is it mostly reactive to different regulations?
Yeah, I feel like in the main, regulation has been reactive for us. I mean, you do see some great pieces of regulation like PIX in Brazil, where that has created a massive opportunity for us, especially where card payments weren't as good as some of the other markets that we see them in. But then, yeah, in terms of opportunity, yeah, there are loads. I would say with a lot of this regulation, it kind of puts into more focus a lot of the localization efforts that become more prevalent these days. So, I mean, if you look at all the regulation that are happening in India, you now have to integrate a payment method like UPI. We haven't got there yet, but certainly it's high on our roadmap. But then you see some downfalls of what functionality is lacking from those kind of payment methods because they are fairly new to the market. But yeah, then for instance, you can take a market like Australia where going local, you can see great opportunity with acceptance rates, but to change your corporate structure to facilitate going local takes a lot of time.
So one thing I'm really interested, given the scale and in reach of both of your companies, is how do you think about prioritizing across everything you just said, Chisim, between PIX and faster payments method in India and Australia? Like, how do you think about prioritizing what to do first and what to do second and what to do third?
Yeah, from my point of view, there's loads of different factors. So yeah, we kind of recently thought about it as kind of two tracks. Things we want to do that are potentially a bit more innovative, so may take a bit longer, and then separate out the things which are just a rinse and repeat of what we've already done. So a lot of the payment methods where it is a tokenized solution, we can just rinse and repeat and get them out fairly quickly, but then maybe have a second track to focus on things which are slightly different, slightly more innovative that we can get done. Most of it just comes down to what do we think is going to make us the most money. Fairly simple stuff like that. But yeah, we do have to also rely on a lot of our payment providers to be up to date, to be agile, to support our fairly unique situation in that most of our transactions happen on the console itself, which is a different beast altogether.
Kelsey,
how about you? How do you guys think about prioritization?
Yeah, I'd definitely say it's a combination of an art and a science. Definitely kind of a mixture of, the customer research, getting that kind of customer feedback and voice of the customer in on, what are their preferred options and do we have availability of those options kind of currently to kind of boost the priority there. Definitely also kind of bringing in a bit of the business strategy, and also the thing we always love is, keeping those stakeholders and business leaders happy, right? So We want to make sure we maximize opportunities that are going to kind of keep the revenue growth in our mature areas and supporting our large volume regions. USCAN's obviously a huge region for us, but we do need to be mindful that we don't only focus on those, right? And we make sure that we're kind of carving out time to work on developing those more emerging markets. So it's definitely a balance, I would say, of you can't always kind of prioritize revenue, because then you're always going to kind of not get the maturity you're looking for, maybe in some of those smaller e-commerce regions that are just starting out. So I'd say it's kind of a never-ending balancing act, right? Of supporting and kind of boosting the importance for those small regions and taking kind of growth in the big revenue bringers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess if you were to then distill down some words of advice, you guys, you live and breathe payments all day, and you're thinking about these trade-offs and what makes sense and how to sequence things appropriately. What's one thing that you've picked up that you might want to suggest or provide guidance to maybe either a payments team that's just getting started or someone who oversees payments, but they haven't spent as much time in the category? Like what would be your words of advice? Maybe Kelsey, I'll start with you for this one.
Yeah, I definitely say kind of lean into the research that's out there, right? And kind of use data as your best friend. I would say that's definitely something that's helped us, right? There's a lot of great research out there that shows, having the breadth of options is very important. Having localized options is important. I would kind of lean on that thought leadership that's out there in the payments industry to inform your kind of plans and strategies, and just share that as much as you can internally, right? I think once you start digging, there's a lot to learn, there's a lot to kind of share, and you actually realize kind of that there aren't always experts in your business that are going to know these things. So don't assume people know, like take what you know and kind of spread it around as much as you can and kind of help them, right? I think that's been the biggest thing for me, I think, is kind of taking the data I have access to and then sharing that internally to influence change, and to help influence those strategies, right? We've all had kind of stakeholders or region leaders come to us and say, hey, I think I definitely need you guys to build PayPal this year, right? And then when you kind of look under the surface, you say, okay, what are you actually trying to solve for, right? Like what is the growth target, or what are you guys trying to hit on that, by coming to us with that ask, and kind of taking their solution proposal and walking it a few steps back to actually solving the problem with them and being a partner to say, hey, actually, I think, if you guys go live with, maybe a direct debit option or a credit card option, you're going to see better returns. They're always open to hearing that kind of feedback and insight, right? So I'd say, arm yourself with the facts, right? And people can't argue with facts, right? So measure what you can and then show the return, right? Once you do get that option live and say, hey, this was a great option, like, thank you for taking the advice on board. We can see this is going really well. So always use the data that you have access to, because even if you don't have time to run those research kind of studies yourself, there's a lot of things out there you can use out of the box. So yeah, that'd be my key advice.
On the lines of a lot of things out there, I found, speaking to your merchant peers, speaking to payment providers, any question is viable for all of these kind of merchants, and you'll be surprised how common a theme everyone's kind of going through, and the amount of information you can get, best practice you can get from your merchant peers is really, really valuable.
Great advice. Cheeson, I'm gonna rapid fire a couple questions in sequence to you, and then we'll go back to you, Kelsey, and do the same. So I think to start, Cheeson, what are areas at PlayStation that you guys are currently exploring to improve performance across the whole payments lifecycle? What are the top priorities?
Yeah, so we're actually doing a lot more with machine learning these days. So where we used to do bin routing, for instance, bin optimization, it was fairly manual, looking at it month by month, quarter by quarter. Now we're tweaking our algorithms so that machines can do this. Hopefully we get to a stage where we can do it on a transaction level rather than a bin level. Other things we're looking at, hopefully this year is the year of alternatives for us. So whether that's being a payment method, alternative card rails, another 3DS provider, because we don't want to be single-threaded just for one 3DS provider. We want to make every attempt to count. So yeah, and that could include sharing more data with issuers as those kind of models or APIs open themselves up.
When you say machine learning, how can you help us bridge the gap between orchestration and some of the machine learning initiatives that you guys are focused on?
Yeah, so R1 is mainly around what used to be called bin routing or optimization. So rather than orchestration, really. Sorry, it would encompass orchestration, but it wouldn't just rely on a specific PSP or a specific require. It'd go down to, okay, we see this transaction by this customer at this time of day with this amount fairly regularly. It succeeds most of the time through this route. Why don't we keep doing that? Or if it fails, why don't we change it so that in fairly real time, why don't we change it so that it has the best option of success? Prior to that, we were kind of doing a before and after comparison, which was working fairly well and definitely gave us great improvements, but just not on the level that machine learning can do.
And that dovetails nicely into the next question, which is like, how do you, some small gains in our category actually have a really material impact on outcomes? Maybe you could spend a minute or two just sharing your thoughts on that concept, given where you sit in the organization, how you need to communicate to other people, the impact of what some of these small gains could mean for the overall bottom line.
Yeah, so small gains are kind of what we're doing at the moment. A lot of the time, most of the big fruit have been done. So for instance, the big fruit I call like account updater, that's been done and dusted for a little while now, although we still try and iterate and improve on those things. The small gains, generally, they're just experiments that we may be running, where we can see a slight better improvement. And so all these small gains add up to something much bigger. And that's essentially where our machine learning comes in.
So you mentioned the machine learning on bin routing. How any other super exciting areas of opportunity that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah. On the theme of localization, I feel like, as I was saying before, with all the regulation that's coming in, localization becomes more important. So potentially we would be looking at having more legal entities, and where before or historically for a company like us, a lot of the corporate structure was built around tax and how we structure our tax. Now payments is more of a driver for potentially we should change our corporate structure. One, because tax could change minimally, but two, because payments would be more efficient as a result. So, and before we weren't really having those kind of conversations of payments being a driver for corporate structure changes. So that's another exciting opportunity for us.
That's a super interesting insight that you're seeing payments actually drive a conversation with really legal and a lot of the work that those teams have to do. Dovetailing back to the first question around how do you balance the needs of all the various stakeholders? So sounds like you have a pretty successful recipe there.
Yeah, and when things like Brexit and the Brexit fees come in, you kind of backed into a corner to say, I just really want the status quo, and how do I get to the status quo? And it's by creating things like legal entities and doing localization.
So what are some of the blockers that you feel like you run up into day to day, trying to, whether it is localization or bin routing, what are the biggest blockers standing in your way?
So I would say probably regulation at this moment in time. So we saw huge issues with 3DS and our conversion rate, and we still see a lot of issues with that, mainly because we're an app-based flow and some banks haven't optimized for those kind of fairly niche flows. And with us being on a lot of our transactions happening on the console, it is a hard use case to get right. We see many merchants struggling with the Argentinian peso at the moment with regulation there on the FX rates. The MPL is becoming more regulated. So while regulation can sometimes be a driver for growth, at this moment in time, it is, as we said before, more reactive and is becoming a blocker in some of the new, more innovative things we want to do.
Visa's actually just come out with Argentinian peso action, so we can. I'll go down in the rabbit hole and see other thing you bring just on 3DS, because that is a topic that we get a lot of questions about. Maybe you could share a little bit more about how your 3DS optimization journey has evolved over time. Things like frictionless and different flows and TRA exemptions. Just talk a little bit of how the crawl, walk, run plan to where you are and where you are today.
Yeah, so we initially rolled out 3DS and tried to do 3DS on every single transaction within Europe, mainly because we built it in such a way which was pretty archaic, and didn't really work. We fast realized that the ecosystem wasn't ready, even though we were fairly ready by the time the deadlines came into play, and realized that our conversion rates, despite potentially greater auth rates once you've had the authentication, our conversion rate in general was pretty poor, and we saw a lot of abandonment, a lot of issues with a lot of different entities within the ecosystem. And then we slowly moved towards a model where we react to soft declines and do it that way. So it means a lot less of our transactions are going through 3DS where it's not required, and we're kind of abiding by, well, if we see a soft decline, then we will look to invoke 3DS. So kind of gone full roundabout on 3DS, but still we see issues with specific areas on conversion rate, and that's what we're really really struggling with at the moment.
So maybe we'll pull out and turn the mic over to the metaphorical mic over to Kelsey. GE Healthcare, massive global company. You guys just spun off into your own publicly traded company in the beginning of the year. You're operating in over 100 markets around the world. What are some of the biggest challenges that you face given the environment that you're operating in?
Yeah, I definitely say it's just managing kind of capacity, right? Managing the prioritization with all of those, segment leaders, region leaders. There's a lot of voices, there's a lot of demand, and we are a relatively small team. So I would say kind of growing the team is probably our top priority right now, so that we can kind of continue to support and do all the research and investment that we want to make the payment strategy successful. I also think kind of how we handle the localization is currently, I would say, a big challenge. I think we've kind of typically tried to kind of set up global strategies for things and then roll those out and hope that they're going to be successful, right? And I think we've very quickly learned that we're going to have to pivot on that, and really offering kind of localized solutions is the key to kind of growth and success for e-commerce. So yeah, I'd definitely say the challenge for us is just balancing the load. And every region leader or segment leader that comes to you, their payment initiative is their top priority, right? But when you're a global team and you're kind of horizontally facing and you're supporting all of those leaders, you need a way to chalk all those number ones down into a list somehow, right? And kind of keep everybody happy and keep things moving. So yeah, I definitely say kind of managing those expectations and kind of managing the partnerships with those business leaders and segment leaders is our biggest challenge today.
So how do you then, you mentioned data earlier, what are some other tactics that you use to help drive decision making and help us get into the day-to-day of Kelsey?
Yeah, so we do have kind of in terms of like how we make those decisions. So data is obviously a big piece of that. We heavily kind of rely on those inputs from customers as well. Like it's great to have region leaders come with strategies and proposals, right? But we want to see that desire is there from the customer side. I'm really not a fan of the build it and they'll come kind of mantra, right? I would much rather say, show me the demand, right, and then we'll make sure that that's effective. I think we've been guilty of doing things like that in the past, right? We've kind of rolled things out, and I think then they haven't been as successful, right? So I think kind of reiterating that message internally to say, like, let us do the research, let us put all of that kind of time and investment into making sure this is the best thing to make you guys successful, has definitely been something that's helped us kind of reorder some of those number ones, right? And maybe they turn out to be number fives, right, in the list. So I think doing that balancing act and kind of bringing them in with the information you have. Also, the way that we're kind of structured, we have as part of our kind of customer digital experience team, we have like a region and business segment kind of team that really help us manage those relationships. So their main role is to be kind of the conduit into those different groups, right? So we'll have somebody who's responsible for taking care of the USCAN region, someone responsible for the EMEA, right? And they kind of help bring in those requests and help us kind of prioritize, because it is a massive effort at the size and scale that we are. So we definitely kind of lean on them a lot to help us with getting getting all of that into a sensible order, right? So that we think we're maximizing on the return on investment, right? With taking up those payment initiatives in that particular order.
Chisen mentioned earlier that the way that they would prioritize generally makes sense. There's a dollar value associated with it. Go after the biggest dollars. One of the things that we observe often is you have different sets of stakeholders that have different North Stars or things that motivate them. So finance might be focused on cost reduction, product might be focused on consumer journey and experience, legal might be focused on optimizing the corporate entity structure, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe you could share a little bit of light on how, as you work across all these different stakeholder groups, you tailor the messaging and the business case, and as the funnel that then has to take in those requirements and normalize them and then work out across the group of stakeholders. If you could share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think it really just depends on kind of, like you said, what are the goals in that region? What are they trying to do? I think a lot of the regions and business segments are in different levels of maturity. So you kind of have to keep that in mind, right? So I think, maybe something that we would focus on for kind of the UScan business might be more in introducing some of these more alternative payment options, things like financing, in more kind of established e-commerce sites that we have and experiences, whereas and optimizing that, right? Making sure the internal operations behind all of that, the reporting and consolidation for kind of our cash teams is very clear and simple, right? To kind of maintain, that's very, very important. Everything we do there, we want to make sure that keeping the internal business processes flowing simply and easily with transparency end to end of the transaction is very important to us there. Whereas, in some of the more emerging markets, we might just prioritize getting some of those basic options out there, and kind of the optimization of the business process comes later, obviously, as we kind of scale and grow there. So, the volume might not be a lot initially in those regions, so we can afford to kind of not put as much investment into what's going to happen with the internal business process. We'll kind of worry about optimizing that kind of further down the line. So yeah, I'd say that's really just focusing on, like, what is the goal for that region? Is it just growth? Is it just even launching an e-commerce site in that region, right? We still have a lot of countries where we have legal entity presence and all of kind of sales are handled offline, and there really isn't much of an e-commerce experience yet. It's more lead generation. So just getting them kind of the table stakes basic options so that they can get an experience that is traditional e-commerce, right, where you actually purchase online, available, is more the goal for them.
Makes sense. I'll turn it back to Chisen. I just need to go back to my question sheet. How do you guys think about weighing providers? Like, what are some of the things that move the needle as you're evaluating partners and other companies to work with? Let's talk a little bit about that, because I know we have a number of folks from the industry on the line.
Yeah, there'll be a number of factors. So yeah, their scope or their market presence, price, their agility, and by agility I mean with their tech stack, and how they're able to react to changes in the market, because we do see constant changes in the market. Then bringing in the wider stakeholders that Kelsey was mentioning before, talking to finance, talking to legal, making sure everyone's on board with it. And then, yeah, things like integration effort. Do we need to integrate? Is it an easy integration? Can we use one of our existing payment providers to get to it? Does it have all the functionality that we need? Can it accommodate all the clients that we have? So a whole long list of requirements are to pinpoint. One, they're all kind of fairly important, or they're all very important. But I would say one of the key things we look for now is agility, because we found having too rigid a structure in this day and age really doesn't help us and doesn't help our consumers. So being able to do things like A/B test, or being able to quickly change something, or relying on our payment providers to be able to quickly change something on their side rather than us, is a key factor in choosing a provider. We saw that with 3DS as well. So not many companies were going or looking at anything beyond 3DS 2.2, but being a console based, most of our transactions happening on the console, we do look for providers who are already thinking about version 2.3, for instance.
Kelsey is similar.
I'd say for us, I think the kind of global coverage is obviously very important with us being such a large business. So that was definitely a big driver in a lot of the decision making that we've gone through. I'd also say kind of the production support element and kind of SLAs from the PSP are very important to us. We've had some relationships in the past where that hasn't always been a great experience, and it's hard to get kind of multiple people on the line, right, to troubleshoot why settlements or transactions have failed, and every dollar counts, right? So making sure that we do have kind of a good relationship and good input from the PSP is important to us if we're going to be successful, right? I think also making sure that whoever you are going to partner with is going to be that kind of strategic partner with you, right? That can advise on the kind of things that are coming out, keeping you involved in discussions that are going on in the payments industry, and getting ahead of the curve is important. So you want to make sure that whoever you are partnering with, right, can give you access to that insight and that data and really be kind of an advisor for you, because it's hard to know what the right thing to do is sometimes on the merchant side. You're very deep in your specific business, right? And so getting that outside expertise is really important to make sure the strategy is going to work well. So yeah, I'd say for us, the primary drivers would be kind of global coverage, and then more the relationship management, right, and the production support that we're getting.
And now you two both individually have to work with whoever is on the other side. So what are the things that people have done that have been hard-nosed or annoyances, or things where you're like, if I experience this thing, I can't work with that provider?
I think there's not really kind of a one thing. I think for us, again, just being so global, I think the flexibility needs to be there, right? You need to be willing to have people who are really committed to helping your business thrive and be successful, right? You want people who are going to make themselves available to you, right? So I think making sure that you have points of contact that you can reach no matter what time of the day is probably that one thing for us. We really are not going to be satisfied with an answer of, oh yeah, we can get back to you on Monday between the hours of 9 and 5 in this specific country, right? It needs to cover the globe and be able to support all the stakeholders and businesses that are running on that platform everywhere. So that'd be the hard no for us. I think the rigidity in the support.
Yeah, and I would say stability, really. So we are looking for reliability, and if our PSP can't provide that, then that would be a big no-no for us.
Quick time check. So we have 10 minutes left. I'm going to take a couple of questions that have come in from the audience. So one question is for you, Chisun. You mentioned that PlayStation is selling hardware online now as well as software. Does the way you think about your payment strategy change for hardware and software, perhaps in terms of payment methods or fraud?
Yeah, it drastically changes. I mean, there are different card scheme rules for digital compared to selling hardware. So some of the processes you will have to change even for card payments. So for instance, the capture rules are different for digital content and delivering of physical items. And then payment methods for sure. Yeah. So every other day, someone's asking me for a buy now, pay later solution for the physical hardware. Obviously, the average transaction value is a lot higher than the digital content side. And then, on the fraud stuff, I would say, not that I really tackle the fraud stuff from my side, but fraud seems a lot more complicated with physical hardware, mainly because it's tangible. There's a lot of resale value. We get a lot of bot action as a result of our physical hardware business. So I think in that respect, it does become a lot harder for physical.
Another one for you, Chisun. You mentioned A/B testing earlier. What are some of the most prominent lessons you learned from your A/B testing?
The prominent lesson was that we don't do enough of it. We do actually very little of it, mainly because of the restrictions on some of our systems. So I would say if you're building a new service, a new system, then try and build in that flexibility to do those A/B testing, because when you've done like the big things and you know the things you need to improve, once those are gone, the A/B testing really helps you identify what the consumer likes, what they don't like.
And then one for both of you. What are some of the biggest trends in the payments industry that you are both personally excited about? And I'll start with you, Kelsey.
I think for me, kind of the rise and kind of focus on like artificial intelligence and the machine learning, I think is going to have a big impact. I think there's a lot of opportunity there to do some of the more advanced things. Cheeson was mentioning that they're doing at PlayStation, right, with like the routing and kind of smart routing there, kind of using the artificial intelligence insight, right, to kind of adjust your strategy and how you're kind of routing and running those transactions. I think also from a fraud perspective, right, kind of getting that insight and being more proactive in the management, I think is going to be a really big kind of optimization and improvement area for automating. So yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of seeing how that disrupts things and definitely improves the space. I think there's a lot of scope for change there. So yeah.
I actually asked ChatGPT some of these questions beforehand, and with some very good high level answers, I would say.
They give great answers.
Yeah.
There we go. See.
So one of the trends I thought of was potentially network tokens. So I know it's been around for a little while, but they're kind of infiltrating all of our e-commerce lives these days. It's hard to get away from them. And I'm particularly interested in how the schemes will potentially make it interoperable, because that seems like a hard task.
So on that question, another one from the audience. What is your relationship with the networks? How do you stay ahead of network changes and interchange increases? Cheeson, maybe we'll start with you.
Just a lot of dialogue with the networks, a lot of dialogue with other merchants. Yeah, there are, I mean, a lot of PSPs put on the updates from the various networks. Sometimes there's too many to comprehend.
Sorry.
We try and ingest them all and see which ones are silly, which ones are okay, which ones we can potentially push back on. But it is just keeping up to date with it, and then hopefully you don't need to make too many changes, and hopefully you get enough lead time in order to make the changes that you need to. But we have had good success in pushing back to the networks on certain things. I know MRC does a great job on opening that dialogue with the networks, and kind of, I know they're getting involved in potentially creating some or influencing a lot of the scheme rules that come out. So yeah, keep on top of it.
How, if you were to stack rank how you do engage with the networks, either direct through an organization like MRC or through your PSP, stack rank top to bottom, which ones you rely on most in order to stay up to date and influence the networks?
In terms of staying up to date, I do heavily rely on the PSPs to give a good overview of what's coming in the next months. If there's something we don't like, we would raise it directly with the networks, hopefully pushing back. In terms of advocacy against the networks or potentially with the networks, MRC do a great job. So it just depends on what exactly you're looking for, I would say.
Makes sense. One more question that has come in. Once payments processing is up and running, how do you think about adding more embedded products like PayFac, issuing, buy now, pay later, etc.? So I guess you can ask this if you're advising maybe an earlier stage company than GE Healthcare and Sony PlayStation. How would you advise them on thinking about adding additional products? Kelsey, maybe
Yeah, I'd definitely say kind of keeping those things in mind, right? That you want to make sure that the PSP you're working with, the platforms that you're building are going to be able to be kind of future-proofed and extensible, right? You want to make sure you can extend, you can build on those platforms and kind of cater to the needs that you're going to see in the future, right? Nobody knows what's around the corner. You need to know that the partners that you're working with are thinking about those things too, right? And are kind of trying to stay ahead of the curve to make sure they can support you and your business in those kind of newer areas. So I'd say definitely having that conversation up front when you're kind of making those decisions on who you're going to partner with is important, because you want to make sure the extensibility is going to be there. And I mean, for us internally, that would be our kind of primary. We would like to kind of keep things as consistent as possible, and kind of leverage the existing integrations that are available to meet those new needs, rather than obviously going off and building something net new ourselves, or doing things directly. Especially again from the global element, right? It's hard to scale something kind of consistently if you're needing to integrate with a lot of different local solutions, right? That's hard to maintain long term. So the more you can kind of build that into a platform that is reusable for you and your business as you grow, I'd say the better. So
yeah, I would just reiterate most of that. Yeah, think about the consumer. Do they actually feel comfortable enough to get these embedded products from you? And if they do, and you see a use case, then yeah, go for it.
All right, so I'm gonna a couple rapid fire questions, and then we'll wrap up because we are 5 minutes away from the end here. So, to start, what's we've covered this a little bit, but what's the trend that you're tracking most closely in 2023? Let's broaden the overall scope to fintech in general beyond just payments. What's the 2023 trend you're most excited about?
go ahead, Jason. We unmuted at the same time.
I did promise I would flip it to one of you and then the other, and I did not do it that time. So I'm glad to see we're both very patient in letting the other one go first.
Too polite. Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you. Thanks, Kelsey. So I did say network tokens before, but if we're going broader fintech, I guess CBDC. I'm not sure I really see the use case for it, but it's going everywhere. I believe China, it hasn't worked as well as they wanted it to do, but I definitely see that if it's supported by governments, that it could take off, but I don't particularly see the use case for it.
We can chat about it.
I'm sure you could convince.
Other than settlement, on the settlement side, sure.
I think for me, maybe kind of more than 2023, but I am really interested to see how kind of cryptocurrencies kind of come into play, and if that does become like a predominant option in the market, like are people and merchants really going to start offering that? I think we're a long ways off ever offering that in a healthcare setting as a preferred method of payment. But yeah, I'm keen to see kind of how other businesses start kind of adopting that and building that into their payment ecosystem as a viable option. So yeah, definitely keen to see what happens there.
How about 2024? That's 2023. Anything different if looking 12 months ahead?
I think biometrics will become ever more present. So yeah, kind of restricted to face, but fingerprint. Yeah, so I think it will get more and more wild.
Yeah, I think it's definitely things are becoming more and more personalized, right? With kind of using a lot of mobile payment options and people expecting that in their kind of typical day-to-day consumer life. So how do we bring that onto more traditional kind of business platforms will be interesting.
And what is one word of advice that you would give to your peers planning for the year ahead?
For me, I'd just say do your research, right? Kind of have that data backing that I mentioned and share that as broadly as you can. I think kind of being the advocate in your business for why payment is important is only a good thing, right? I think it'll kind of help elevate the status of payment there. And if it isn't kind of at the point that you would hope it to be in terms of importance in the business yet, hold on. I think people, as soon as you start sharing those insights, realize kind of how critical this is to the future success there, and it'll naturally elevate, right? So kind of spread the word as much as you can and use that data.
And my one word would be agility. So just building that flexibility in order to maneuver yourself depending on the challenges you face, because these challenges keep coming and keep changing. So building that agility will help you for the future.
I think that's a great prelude to our closing words here, which is that this conversation really is just the beginning. As the category continues to evolve, the needs of the market continue to evolve, the technologies, the people as well that are making decisions. It's really important that we keep the conversation going. So for those who are tuning in today for the first time, thank you for joining us. For those who are repeat attendees, thank you for joining us as well. We would love everyone's feedback on this session. My colleague Beth just posted a link in the chat that has a quick survey. So if you wouldn't mind spending 30 seconds filling it out and giving us your feedback so we can make sure that we keep delivering content that is helpful for everyone that spent the time tuning in. That would be much appreciated. Thank you mostly to Cheeson and to Kelsey for joining us today. Cheeson from Sony PlayStation, Kelsey from GE Healthcare, two of the most innovative, cutting edge, large global enterprises when it comes to forward-thinking payment strategies. So thank you both for taking the time, for sharing your insights. And we will be back in April at the beginning of Q2 with our next installment of this Build Beyond series. And for now, right on time, we'll sign off. So thank you both for taking the time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.